And welcome to the Spartanmag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Spartan Stadium, Michigan State loses to Michigan 31-20. Paul Bunyan not coming back to East Lansing. Michigan State had some good flurries in this game, Paul, and didn't quite have enough to overcome some tough breaks and so forth that went against them. Not quite good enough. They stopped the run on a lot of plays through the course of the game, but not quite enough to complement some pretty good pass defense for Michigan State for a change. And again, there's some progress in some areas, but it's another loss, 5 straight losses, 5 straight double-digit losses. People tired of the losses, tired of the double-digit situation. Not as bad as the UCLA game in terms of body language and everything else. But the numbers are 3 and 5. It's not getting any better. It's going to be tougher to get to 5 wins, 6 wins. And we'll talk more about the macro, the whole situation with Michigan State, the coaching situation, all those things later on. But the game itself, Michigan State battled 10-7 at halftime. Michigan was vulnerable at that point. Key play win against Michigan State in the early in the third quarter. But overall, your thoughts about the game coming out of Michigan State? It's fallen to 3 and 5, 31-20 as it turned out.
I just don't think the run defense was good enough. You can say they did some good things. They almost gave up 300 yards rushing, and that for a Michigan State program that prides itself on stopping the run isn't good enough. And I know Michigan punted 7 times in this game, but this is a Michigan team that cannot do it. They can't throw the ball very effectively. They are going to run the football. You know it's coming, and Michigan State was right in this at halftime, but then in the second half you gave up 3 straight explosive runs. And the thing about the running game is the whole point of the running game is to chip away at the rock face, and then you end up caving in, and that's what happened with Michigan State. So you could say, hey, they did a good job stopping the run, but stopping the run is a game-long proposition, and you don't really stop the run unless you do it all game long. And 189 yards in the second half given up on the ground, 7 yards of carry. All 4 of Michigan's touchdowns were on the ground, and a couple of those were like pop-out type things where a guy wasn't there on the edge. And Michigan State played hard in this game, but I don't feel much better about this than I would if I'm Michigan State. It's a continuous issue is this stopping the run, and it didn't help that Jordan Hall and Ben Roberts weren't in there. And Michigan State, they played hard on defense, and I think some of the run issues that Michigan State faced was the fact that the offense wasn't good. But each week we're talking about different ways that Michigan State loses a game, and in my opinion, it's not going to get any better because you're like, how can you put 3 phases together? Well, Michigan State hasn't this year, not since maybe against Western Michigan, or maybe probably that's the only game where they've really had a 3-phase game, and they kind of find ways to lose. I thought Michigan State had a lot of scrap tonight. If the Aiden Childs that we saw,
where do you think they showed the scrap?
I think they showed the scrap on probably in the run game a little bit. They showed the scrap on they did get some stops. They did, but it just wasn't. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Jake Laskow just a few minutes ago. Can you think of 5 times during the Mark D'Antonio era where they gave up 276 yards on the ground?
No, not very often, and usually only to really, really good teams. And Michigan's not a really, really good team. I think Justice Haynes is a really good running back, and he's not 100%, but he moved the pile a little bit. Marshall would start for most Big Ten teams that didn't have Justice Haynes on the team, and those guys sometimes are their own blocker. They move the pile and daylight and sprint pretty good. They're a handful, and the problem is when I said early on, Michigan ran 22 plays in the first quarter. That's a pace for 88 plays in a game. No one plays, no one runs 80. That's a lot, because there were so many incompletions in the first quarter. Last year when Michigan State got off to a good start against Michigan, not only they went down and were stopped 4th and 1 at the goal line, everybody remembers that, but that ate up 1/8 of the game. It shortened the game. When Michigan State was doing well last year, they were running the ball, clock was running. Tonight it was incompletion, stop clock, incompletion, stop clock for both teams. And there were just so many plays in the first quarter, and this was a game, Michigan's deeper than Michigan State. Michigan State needed the clock to run and shorten the game, and where does that manifest itself? When the defense is playing that many snaps, what breaks is the run defense.
Yeah, if you look at the Aiden Childs that played last weekend against Indiana, and they wanted that Aiden Childs to play in this game, and that's the reason why they came out passing. This is a deal where I thought, you could say Michigan State was kind of too cute in this because in their first 3 series they had 1 conventional run play. and that was a Mekhi Frazier 2-yard gain. The rest of the stuff was pass, 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 pass. And if Aiden Childs was accurate like he was against Indiana, that wouldn't have been a problem. But he wasn't, and actually when the offense got on track is when they started running the football. You saw it, those 2 running plays in a row. They got erased by the illegal hands to the face penalty by Caleb Carter, and that was a problem. But that first run play that Mekhi Frazier had in that series, that was good, 5-yard gain. Then he would have had another one for a first down, but it was negated by the illegal hands to the face.
And every first down is important for the reason I just mentioned, and that hand to the face was behind the play. It had nothing to do with the success of that play. Should have been 1st and 10. This is when Michigan State's not getting first downs their first 4 possessions. Just another set of downs. Maybe then you run more clock. You give your defense a rest. Yeah. Every little thing you needed to go your way for Michigan State to get an upset and get in position for an upset. That illegal hand to the face. I'm not sure if his hand slipped up there and he got caught. Caleb Carter hasn't been that
purpose. It wasn't like one of those I'm going to tear your helmet off deals. It was where he was like going by and it was like
kind of slipped up there and then he kept it up there. He had to call it. It was a good call, but little things like that. Michigan State needed all those things to go well. That one didn't. Had to punt it again. Put the defense back on the field.
Yeah, and like the big play that really sparked the offense, that really kind of got it going for Michigan State was a 49-yard run by Tullis, who like I know people think say he wouldn't start for a lot of MAC teams. On that play, he looked really good. Mm-hmm. He looked every bit as good as Nate Carter or, the other guy that ran for Michigan State last year.
K'Ron Lynch-Adams?
Yeah, K'Ron Lynch-Adams, but maybe even better. I mean, he was crisp on his cuts and he had good cutbacks. But that run play sparked what Michigan State got going in the first half. And they had
changed the game for a little while.
And they had plenty of opportunities, too. There was Michigan State's defense did a pretty good job, but in the second half, it slipped away. You have 3 straight explosives kind of coming out of halftime, and you're like, because I was thinking if Michigan State gets a stop, Michigan gets the ball first, and Michigan State gets a stop on defense, which they almost did.
They kind of did.
Yeah, and they did. But like giving up those 3 explosives, that was kind of a bad sign of things to come.
This is where the run defense was bad. They weren't good enough to deal with those, the bad call or any little thing that would go wrong getting into the red zone run defense this year. That's when a lot of times Michigan State is blowing holes. Right. Michigan State, like Nick Saban used to always say, it's an obvious statement, but Saban was always like, we got to be hard to score against. I don't care if they get down there or not. You got to be hard to score against at the end. And Michigan State is not difficult to score against inside the 20, inside the 15 with the run defense for whatever reason. But if you get that turnover there, or the pass interference that wasn't called on a third down play in the second quarter, or the holding call where over the middle to receiver on second down where you're punting after that, or the hand to the face, if those things don't happen, that helps your run defense because it keeps them off the field and it just it limits your chances to get exposed. The more this defense is exposed to have to make play after play after play, eventually they're going to fail because they're not good enough to hold up for an entire game against a good run offense.
Was this defense better than it was last week against Indiana? I don't know because Indiana is so much better, I think, in more balance of a team.
Is it better than last week? Yeah. I mean, they forced 7 punts. Or how many punts?
7.
I'm just saying 0 punts last week.
I'm just saying, Indiana, I think, is a lot better offense. And,
yes.
So I think this game here, the thing that's frustrating about this game, games like this feels like the reverse Nebraska. Nebraska was a short passing team that Michigan State had pretty good success against on defense, and the offense didn't hold up its end of the bargain. I think this was the reverse of it. Michigan can't throw the ball very well, but they do run the football.
Michigan can throw the ball well against some opponents. Last week he was like 22 out of 27 or 24 out of 29. It was just ball control short passing against Washington. So Michigan State playing good pass defense against these guys. I don't diminish that.
If you have the ability, they'd rather run the football. They'd rather not put him in situations like where he has to throw the ball a ton. And Michigan State did do a good job stopping the quarterback run. That was another area where I think Michigan State did a nice job. But I just felt like this is another instance where the offense didn't hold up its end of the bargain. And there's special teams errors too. I mean, you don't know how big something like that. Omari Kelly lets a punt go over his head. I don't know if he lost it, didn't know where it was, but he misplayed it. And that's one of those deals where all of a sudden, instead of being at the 25 where you're in a comfortable range, you're up against the shadow of your own goal line, and you can't win making mistakes like that. That's one of the reasons why Samaj Morgan got ripped so hard by Michigan coaches at halftime because of when he fielded that the kickoff where after the 15-yarder on Andrew Dennis, like he just fair caught it, and where he should have run up the field. Like you never know when like a little special teams error that doesn't seem big at the time is going to manifest itself into something huge. And that thing by Myra Kelly, it's another example of Michigan State finding ways to beat themselves, and that's what teams that are mired in this kind of stretch of losing football do. Every week it's a different thing, and everyone's saying we just have to execute better. Every guy has to be on the same page. And when you're in this type of streak, it's, there's guys that are good football players, good people that are making mistakes that they shouldn't for various reasons, and it just kind of snowballs, and that's what Michigan State finds itself in. They're finding different ways to lose. But this game against Michigan, the game against Nebraska, those are both winnable games, more winnable than they were on paper. They appeared on paper to a lot of people nationally, but Michigan State comes away from this game thinking, if I only would have not committed however many penalties it was, a dozen penalties, and some of those weren't all Michigan State's fault. I get that. But, those all these things magnify and get manifested in this type of thing, game like this.
A good team overcomes those things. And Michigan State's not a good team. They need all the help they can get, and they need to help themselves. And 12 penalties or whatever it was. Tough way because Michigan's not a great team. They're a pretty good team. Like I said in the pre-snap read, you do not, like I said in the Nebraska game, you do not have to be a great team to beat Michigan. You don't have to be a great team to beat Nebraska. That's been established. You don't have to be all that good to beat Michigan. The question was whether Michigan State's any good, and they're not. Are they going to get there later in the year? They may get that chance to prove that. It's doubtful. Whether they can get off the mat one more time. I mean, they put a lot into this game, and they were more drained and despondent after this loss than any others. Deservedly so, understandably so, against the rival. Whether they can keep getting up off the mat, that's going to be difficult. But they didn't. Michigan's pretty good. The rest of the schedule's pretty manageable. They might end up 9-3 if they lose to Ohio State or whatever. Michigan State might end up 3-9. But the disparity on the field tonight was not 9-3 versus 3-9.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating thing. But I think when you look at it, like one of the things that like Michigan State has to do well, they have to have consistency in performance at the quarterback position. I mean, you can't put the kind of display that Childs put on last week against Indiana against a really good defense when Michigan State wasn't able to run the ball, and then have the kind of game that he had tonight. Like Michigan State needs him to perform at a
Childs.
Absolutely. He's got to perform at a certain level. And I think there's a lot of quarterbacks over the years in this game that have risen up and played at a high level. And I'd say the same thing about receivers. I felt like Michigan State receivers didn't raise the level of their game like we've seen from guys like Jaden Reed or Felton Davis or Plaxico Burress. I mean, he's an all-time great, but there's a lot of guys that have played really big in this game. I didn't feel like there was guys out there making 50-50 catches like you need to make to win this game. I didn't feel like the quarterback play was like what you got in the past from other teams that were maybe somewhat one-dimensional. I think Tony Banks back in the day, and he was a great quarterback, but he had a big game against Michigan, and maybe not a great running performance for that team. I think of Bill Burke, back in the day. There's a lot of guys that have played. Brian Lewerke. There's a lot of guys that have raised the level.
Rocky Lombardi.
You've got to play at harness a certain level of competitiveness. And
Peyton Thorne with those 2-point conversions and fourth down completions here in 2021.
Well, part of that was Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor and those guys, and there's Trey Mosley, I think, had some big catches in there, but you guys got to raise the level of their play. And I felt like tonight, look at the receivers out there. Jonathan Smith, I thought, was accurate in his post-game press conference when he was talking about guys have got to do a better job playing catch. And he wasn't talking about just Aiden Childs. He was talking about the receivers. Nick Marsh finishes with 70-some yards in here, but he got 13 targets in this game. And there's a lot of times where it was man coverage and there was zero separation. And I'm thinking of all the other times I've seen in games like this where, guys are going to fight tooth and nail for every inch on the field, and I just felt like that element wasn't there. There wasn't guys making 50-50 plays. And there wasn't a quarterback that was accurate, but at least when he had a chance to run in short yardage, he scrapped and he played hard. And Childs did, but I didn't feel like he had guys.
He gave it everything he has, but sometimes he doesn't have his fastball, accurately.
And he wasn't good, but those receivers didn't help him out. There were drop passes. And
when Smith said they just needed to play catch, he means there were openings there, open receivers, and he missed them. Is that the way you took that?
No, I took it also. There were guys covered up that need to get open. I think there's like that one series where he went to Nick Marsh 3 straight times, and it was like it wasn't being double covered. He wants to be a big time receiver. He wants to be one of the all time greats. I'm thinking guys like Keon Coleman. I think of guys like Jaden Reed, who I mentioned. Those guys get open in those type of instances.
Or 50-50 balls, like you said.
And I mean, I'm not ripping on Nick Marsh, but I'm just saying in games like this, you've got to reach your ceiling, or you got to find a different level. And guys that do, that's the reason why they win games like this. Why Michigan State's won games like this in the past when they've been underdogs. Michigan State didn't have that to them tonight.
It required an A game from a lot of people across the board, and Michigan State didn't have that, even though they were right in it in the third quarter, 10-7 at halftime. And the big play at the beginning of the third quarter, and Michigan State not strong enough to withstand some tough breaks there. You talk about 50-50 balls. Go back to some games that Michigan has won. Braylon Edwards against Jaron Hayes. It was 6'2.5" versus 5'10", and they just threw it up to him and had a great comeback. 50-50 balls, just put him up there. And sometimes these games are determined by things like that. Michigan State, all right, the offside play. And it's something to be discussed because Michigan State wasn't good enough to come back from that or get off the field after it happened. Michigan State's not a good enough team to take a bad break like that and overcome it. Michigan State could not afford to have a deficit in officiating tonight, and they did. And that happened. Sometimes they've won games with some favorable calls. We know that in the past. But that one, it's 10-7. Michigan gets the ball at the beginning of the second half. Good blitz call, times it well, and gets flagged for timing it perfectly. Official basically called something that he didn't see because he thought he saw something. It's not like he called something he didn't see. Maybe it's a little optical illusion on that thing, whatever. Sack, fumble, should have been Michigan State's ball at the 41-yard line, down by 3 with all that momentum. I think Michigan still would have won the game because they were the better team. They could run the ball, all those things. And if it had been close in the fourth quarter, do I have faith that Michigan State would have been making the good plays, the smart plays to pull it out? Probably not. Michigan was the better team tonight, deserved to win. And they got into a favorable push on that one. And just kind of sucks for Michigan State that they have a good play call, Malcolm Bell with a good play, and it gets negated by somebody else not doing their job well. And I hate to rip on officiating. Michigan's the better team, deserved to win. I'm not going to turn this into Eddie Brown for 30 years. And I don't like to rip on officiating. I've mentioned this in my podcast before, because there's a culture of sports fans across the country that just want to rip on officials at the youth level, JV level, varsity level. They show up at games, youth games, thinking automatically that the officials are the bad guys. And they're just waiting to get screwed like the officials. No, the officials are out there doing their best. They love the game. These guys will make a lot of money. But officials that are officiating youth league games, they're out there because they love the game, trying to make an honest buck, whatever. People out there, take it easy on youth league officials. They're doing the best they can. They're not trying to screw anybody. So I don't like to add to the culture of ripping on officials. I just want to say that because here I am ripping on an official.
I don't want to, except on the ones that have officiated my daughter's games because they all suck. But I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding about that.
No, they don't.
Yeah, but that was.
We need officials. There's a lot of high school games and various sports in the state of Michigan that are canceled because of lack of officials. So if you want to be an official, be an official. And if you want to rip on officials at a youth league game or high school game, try not to. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, but that was a tough break.
That call sucked.
It did. It was a tough break, and I mean, I wasn't there on the field. I don't know what he saw, but that's something that
I can see why he saw it that way. But when you look at the replay, he saw something that he didn't see.
Right. So
I've seen Michigan State benefit from that, and I go back to the regional finals, Michigan State against Tennessee, Elite Eight basketball, when Raymar Morgan was going up, and the guy from Tennessee came down and hatcheted, and it was clean. He got all ball. But the official called something that he thought he saw and called a foul. Morgan has 2 free throws, go to the Final Four. The official called something that he thought he called something he didn't see.
That's different because as a basketball player, you're taught. As a college basketball player, you are taught when you hatch it down, you're going to get called for a foul.
That's right.
So, it might have been clean, but when you make that motion, and anybody that's played basketball knows this, that's why it's taught. Like when you're trying to block shots, that you keep your hands up and you stay. You don't bring it down because that's human nature. This was a little bit different. This one was a little bit. And it happens. We've seen this in this game before, but I think it's like, I think there's a phantom touchdown, maybe in 2008 or 2009 against one of Mark D'Antonio's teams where a guy never crossed the goal line, but official thought a Michigan player crossed the goal line, or maybe it was like one of those late whistle type of deals, and or where the whistle blew, but someone decided it hadn't. So there are times where. But Michigan State came back from that. This team isn't capable of doing that because, for whatever reason.
Not good enough, Paul.
Yeah, I mean
consistently.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, if the version of Aiden Child played last week was in this game with, a pretty decent run game in some aspects for Michigan State, better than I thought it would be.
Me too.
And I wonder if, like, when Michigan State watches this film, if they're like, because I thought. Against UCLA when they came out and they took the ball first, we're going to go down to the field and score, and then it ended up being a block punt for a touchdown or whatever it was. It just feels like I felt like Michigan State came out we're going to pass. Everyone thinks that you got to run the football to win this game.
The block punt was against Nebraska on the opening drive.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, but there was some UCLA stuff where Michigan State
fake punt.
Yeah, fake punt that didn't work out or whatever. But
yeah.
I just felt like, it was Nebraska where they took the ball, right?
Took the ball first, which. And on a windy day against that pass defense?
Okay, so we're just saying, this is like one of those things where they came out, hey, we're going to throw the ball. Aiden Child's going to.
Kind of understandable after last week, but in retrospect, like you said, Michigan State had some surprising glimmers of hope in that run game.
But I don't think you can hope. I don't think you can hope to do it like Michigan State did, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. You've got to keep that clock going, and it obviously didn't help the defense. I do think that. There was a little bit more fight to this defense with Joe Rossi on the sidelines.
So
I mentioned in a couple of VCasts ago that I thought that was one thing that he could do is come out of the box. Mm-hmm. You remember me saying that?
Yeah.
And I think that he's got a little bit of fire. He showed some emotion.
He did.
And I think they need that. The defense needs that. Like we talk about the sideline being quiet sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think what Joe Rossi did today, I think that gave the defense in some ways a spark, but the offense wasn't up to the task. And Michigan does have a good defense, and they do eventually wear you down and beat you up. And Michigan State the dam broke on them.
So, yes, it did. And I can see why Michigan State went to the air early on. When they go back over the film and they saw. When they went to the run game, conventional run game, there were some glimmers of hope there, including the one, gain of 6, then a gain of 7, illegal hand to the face. And then when they went to it later on, the 47-yard run, which turned the game around midway through the game. Last year they came out having shown not much reason to believe that the run game was any good last year, came out against Michigan and had a lot of sustained success in the first half with the run game out of nowhere. They're going to second-guess themselves and say...
Well, they should, because the 3 straight drives where you have one conventional run play, and then on the 4th, that's when they had the penalty. But that's your 4th drive. You think
hindsight.
About it. I mean, hindsight, okay, I get it, but that's your first quarter. That's 4 drives into your first quarter. I mean, that's crazy.
And in this game, it's all about the run.
They didn't go the run until they were down 10-0.
Exactly. Didn't have a first down until they were down 10-0. And when they look at it again, they'll wonder what if we had game planned and scripted differently and tried to saddle up the run right away, like they did last year. I remember Michigan State's had some bad teams that for whatever reason have been able to run the ball against Michigan early on, mindset, rivalry, whatever. It might, unknown is undefeated. It might not have worked either, but incomplete. The first play of the game, counter boot, because Michigan's got pretty good pass rushers, especially on third down when number 8 and number 1 are in the game together. First game, counter boot roll. Childs should have thrown an interception on the first play of the game. He's lucky he didn't. The decision was not great. Throws it behind him, got away with it, fumbled 2 plays later. He's out there trying, but he kind of reverted back to last year, trying to the point of error. And in a game like this, you kind of need him to take that Tony Banks step and push the envelope and see what happens. However, Michigan's, I don't know if it required that. Maybe like later in the third quarter, offensive coordinators have talked about there's a time when you need to take a risk. If we're down 10 and it's 3rd and 8 and there's 14 minutes to go, that's the time to take a risk. We need it now. First play of the game, So it started backwards. There have been some games this year where Aiden Childs has gotten rocked for various reasons. Maybe pass protection breaks down or whatever, and he's not quite been the same the rest of the game. This game, he made a couple of errors early and really wasn't quite the same. Later on, he had a little flurry of success, but it was a false start for Michigan State, and that led to all those incompletions, which led to your defense being on the field for 22 plays in the first quarter, which I think eventually had an impact on the run defense.
I agree with you on that.
The 2-point conversion decision.
Don't like it.
Michigan State, as you might remember, had just cut it to 11 points with about 8 minutes to go. What was it?
Yeah.
And everybody knows what happened. They decided to go for 2 and didn't get it, and it stays 24-13 instead of 24-14. Smith was asked about it, and he was talking about the analytics of the thing. You're going to need a touchdown at some point. We felt like we needed to go ahead and get a touchdown there. I understand those analytics. I remember Northwest. A lot of teams have done this. I remember Northwestern a few years ago was playing Minnesota, and they're down by 14 with like 5 minutes to go, and they score a touchdown, and they go for 2. When you're like, wait a minute, kick a field goal, you get it back, kicking out the field goal, going to overtime. But the analytics are nationally, people make 2-point conversions more than 50% of the time. So if you do that enough, you're eventually going to come out. I don't say I believe it, but that's what the analytics say. So he was going with those analytics on this one to cut it to 9, and then whatever it was, so you'd be ahead later on. Turns out you get behind later on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I didn't. I wondered if they might do it, and I saw them do it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know about this. Didn't work out, and hindsight being 2020, but I didn't like it at the time. I know you didn't either. A lot of people talking about it, and Smith explained it, but I don't agree with it.
I mean, you got to look at, okay, national percentages, I get that. I understand that, but you got to look at how your quarterback is throwing the football, and you got to look at what's going on and how your receivers are catching the football. And I just feel like in a situation like that, you're down 11. If it doesn't work, and then you found Michigan State in a situation where they could have, on 2 of their trips, they ended up being turnovers on down. They could have kicked a field goal potentially and then put themselves down a touchdown. I just feel like at that point, you're kind of, if you don't make it, you're giving their defense a little bit of momentum, because then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now they got to score 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, 24-15.
Or they at least got to do a 2-point conversion again. I just like having, because Michigan State was inside the 30-yard line or 35-yard line twice, and they ended up being turnovers on down. Connington has kicked some long field goals, and I just feel like you're in your home stadium. You got to give your guys, trust your guys that they're going to do it. Michigan State hasn't been great, I don't think, on 2-point conversion tries this year. And like on a night where Childs is not throwing the ball well, that's, to me, I'm like, no, I don't care what the analytics say. Some things are a gut feel.
Exactly.
You might be like in baseball. Oh, hey, a left-hander's got to go in this situation. I get that. But you're not. Would you put a left-hander in who's struggled to face a batter that he's going to face or something like that? Well, the analytics say that you have to have a left-hander here. And I'm just saying sometimes it's situations, sometimes it's gut. But on this night, Childs didn't have his A game. He had his what he called D- game, and it wasn't good enough. That was, obviously there's other areas that Michigan State struggled. You mentioned the penalties. That was one of them. I think Michigan State did some kind of dumb things too. Like some of those penalties, like Josh Eaton's walkover. It's just like, I know some people are, what's the big deal? You just don't do that. You're going to get called for it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like the decision there, and I just feel like it took options off the table for Michigan State later on in the game.
Yeah, it was 24-13 with 12 and a half minutes to go. Cut it to 10 there with 12 minutes to go. That's plenty of time. And it's a different psychological construct, too. Especially
once you got a 3. Didn't they get a 3 and out the next time?
Yeah. Then 3 and out and a punt. They stopped. There was 3rd and 12. They ran an inside. So Michigan was getting conservative there a little bit. On a 3rd and 12, they ran an inside run, and Snow and Santiago make the tackle, and they punt it back. So Michigan's kind of playing in your hands a little bit. They're not comfortable going to the air. And if you kick an extra point there, it's 24-14. You get the ball back. Later on, very next drive, Michigan State has 4th and 3 with 8 minutes to go, 8:35 to go. If you'd kick the extra point, you're down 10. A 47-yard field goal there, which is no gimme. Unknown's undefeated. And like Smith said, we needed a touchdown there. Field goal's not a sure thing, so we need a touchdown at some point, which you kind of do, but set it up so you get a touchdown later in the game, where you live to fight another day when you're down by 13, down by 12. In my opinion, you're trying to fight off the ropes and just kind of scrap for every inch you can to try to get maybe to overtime rather than to get to where you win it at the end with a 2-point conversion. Anyway, if you'd only kicked an extra point, you guys know the math. Then a 47-yard field goal right there cuts it to 7, like you would have said, with 8:35 to go. You're down. All of a sudden, you're down 7. 8:35 to go. In this stadium, give them the ball back after they just ran the ball on 3rd and 12. You think it was getting a little tight over there on their sideline?
And the crowd's back into it too. It's like like the not getting the 2 point, that's a deflating type thing. Like turning over on downs, that's a deflating type thing late in the game.
In euchre parlance, that's called missing a trick, Paul.
Yeah.
You know much about euchre?
Yeah.
I'll bet you're a pretty good euchre player.
Yeah, better at poker.
Wow. So anyway,
Wow. It just is what it is.
all right. So Michigan State loses. In terms of boys will be boys and people, handling themselves okay. A.J. Dennis got a personal foul when actually he was grabbed by a face mask and trying to get the handoff, and he was a little too demonstrative, but he was jacked up. He was in the game because Connor Moore had to come off because his helmet, he had an equipment thing. So for the first time in his life, A.J. Dennis is on the field. They get a touchdown, and he's a little too jacked up, got a flag. But you mentioned Josh Eaton away from the play, running play. He's wrestling with Andrew Marsh, their freshman, and Andrew Marsh kind of, I think Marsh kind of wins the takedown at the end of it, and Eaton rolls back over and stands over him. I appreciate Josh Eaton being into it, and he was into it tonight, and he's been told all week what this game means and all those things, and that at that point when Michigan State needed to get off the field another 15 yards, it turned out Michigan State still had another last gasp after that, but that's just
second guy always gets caught, man. That's the number one rule, right?
And Marsh didn't do anything wrong. The Marsh kid from Michigan,
right.
he was just in a little wrestling match, and then Tao Tolliver down in the goal line, late hit. He's trying to block 95 Trey Pierce, who's a good player, locked up with Pierce, and Pierce drove him, kind of bulldogged him into the ground. Legal, pretty much. I don't see anything illegal with that. Tao Tolliver gets up and goes over and hits him in the shoulder. 15 yards, that turns, second and goal of the 2 into second and goal of the 17.
This ain't the FCS anymore, Tal. I mean, it's it's a rivalry game.
Ironically,
kind of stuff adds up, man.
All 4 of those guys are in their first year in this rivalry. Marsh is a true freshman. I'm pretty sure Pierce is a first-year transfer, I think. Maybe not. Don't quote me on that. But Tao Tolliver, his first game in this rivalry, and Josh Eaton, first game in this rivalry. Last year, Anthony Woods, or whatever his name was, Anthony Jones, it was his first year in the rivalry. So, Smith is talking, trying to get everybody to play with emotion but not be emotional. That was one of their talking points all week. Keeping the lion in the cage is the way D'Antonio would talk about it. There's a way to play hard in this, but it is a different game. I've never played it, and I don't know. You've all seen it. You've all witnessed it. It does different things to different players in this game. Joe Rossi talked about it this week, saying this rivalry is different than Wisconsin versus Minnesota, nothing like this. Aiden Childs said Oregon State was nothing like this. So some of these first-year players in it for the first time, they did this. And luckily it didn't get any worse than that, but those will be learning points for next year, I guess, whoever's still here and so forth.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough deal all the way around, but it is what it is. And Dennis, he didn't get burned badly because like I mentioned, Samaj Morgan, fair caught that on the
kickoff.
Yeah.
And then the Tao Tolliver personal foul. Michigan State smartly went into the end zone next play on that corner route, and they drew a pass interference, so they're right back to where they were, and they scored.
But that could have been. I mean, that could have been.
Could have been huge.
Could have been devastating.
You can't win this game giving up yards like that. They got away with that one. But.
So I mean, the thing that is interesting about this, what's lost in all this, like Mekhi Frazier, I think he had a really good game.
He did.
That's something like he had 100 yards in this game. You can't fake that.
That one where he had, on that drive when they ended up getting stopped on 4th down, Frazier had a 25-yard run at the beginning of that play, and somebody, 34, off the top of my head, I don't know who 34 is, had an arm tackle. Otherwise, he might have gone the distance and cut it to 24-20 right then, or you go for 2 and make it 24-21. He almost went the distance on that one with 8 minutes to go to the game. That was that one guy got an arm on him and slowed him up just enough to keep him from. He almost got out on that one, Paul.
Yeah, so
Frazier played well.
So my big thing right now is where does Michigan State go from here?
Where do they go from here?
I don't know.
Famous Doug Karsh question in 1994.
Don't care. Right now it's a Paul Konyndyk question, and I
like Doug.
That's fine.
He's a good man.
That's great, but. I don't know. Jordan Hall had an X-ray during the third quarter, so like he was in post game talking about what went wrong with the run defense in the second half, and he didn't even see it because he was getting an X-ray. Ben Roberts, who I think is their best run defender, and
Van Sumer's pretty good too.
Van Sumer's really good. I take Alex for granted, and he played his tail off today, as I expected him. When I talk about guys taking their game up to the next level and playing with like an extra heartbeat, to use an old Hayden Fry-ism,
extra heartbeat. Okay.
That's what Alex Van Sumeren did today. He played really hard, and he was good, as a run defender. He gave everything he had. But, losing a guy like Ben Roberts, especially when you're on the field as much as they were, that hurts. And I think, like some other guys played okay on the defensive line, but for Michigan State to get kind of right and to kind of try to get back and do some good things and get in the winning column, it's hard to see. They need guys like Roberts and Jordan Hall. It's difficult for me. And I thought Wayne Matthews, in a lot of ways, he raised his level of play to match the rivalry.
During one of Michigan State's flurries, he made like a shuffle stack and made a linebacker play.
He got off blocks and he played hard physically. And I don't know. I'm not going to say that's because Joe Rossi was on the sideline or anything, but. So this team,
I thought having Nakai Martinez helped a little bit too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was helpful. But you saw guys bringing it and playing hard. And where do they go from here? I mean, obviously, I think you got a good group of guys because they continue to play hard and compete amidst a 5-game losing streak, and that's not easy to do. And I do think these guys have stayed together for the most part, but. You wonder at this point in the season, like they needed this win. To me, this is a must-win game to salvage the season, given what happened against with UCLA, and I don't know where Michigan State goes from here. The leadership I think has been pretty good, but it's hard when a guy like Aiden Childs is struggling. He's a leader. It's hard if you're Jordan Hall and you're team leader and you're hurt and you're not out there leading on the field. And there's other guys that are in leadership roles. You mentioned Alex Van Sumeren. He's a guy that I think was a game captain today maybe, but he's a good leader, and he's a guy that no one's going to mess with. So I think there's some good dudes in that program, but there's a lot of other teams out there that are, there's a lot of parity, and that's what, like I think you mentioned 9-3 and 3-9, and there's really not much difference, and I agree with you. We saw last week when we were riding back riding back in the car from Bloomington to Indianapolis, and you're like, okay, Minnesota played a really good game, against Nebraska. They let that thing snowball and they won it, and all of a sudden Minnesota's looking really good. Today they get thumped by Iowa. Michigan State's got to play that Iowa team, and everyone likes to rip on Iowa always every year. Oh, they look like Iowa. Yeah, they do on defense. Look at them. And
Beautiful.
They get better. And
I tell you what, Iowa's also, for 20 years, Ferentz would change offensive coordinators, but it would look the same because it was his offense. It's different now. They're letting Lester. They're doing different things now, and they've added a little. The offense is kind of. I think
with Lester, they run the football better last year, a little bit better. Instead of some of the traditional Iowa stuff, and this year I think they're, they lost their running back from last year, but they're still good running the football, and that defense is, I think, better this year than it was last year. So Michigan State's got that game, but it's not easy. You take these lumps and you want to get better and you want to win games, but there's other teams out there that want to win games too, and they might look winnable. But right now, this is a Michigan State team that's finding ways to lose in games.
It doesn't take much, man.
And I don't see that changing until it does.
You can. We talked about this last week. Like Illinois, as a young reporter watching them when they had, I don't know who the head coach was. I think it was Makovic when he left for Texas. Good program. Lou Tepper took over, who was a good, respectable coach. And it only took a little bit less every single week. And you can go from 9-2 to 0-11 in the Big Ten. Seen it happen. And, that's kind of where Michigan State is right now. Big Ten's better these days. It just takes a little bit. And you're just good enough to lose every single week, and there's no breathing room on that schedule next week at Minnesota. Minnesota's wounded coming off this Iowa loss. We'll see what they'll get back off the mat. They'll be solid. They're not a spectacularly talented team. They handled Nebraska on that night. Today against Iowa, Iowa wins the toss, goes down, scores. They're at home, and Minnesota gets the ball back, and I think it was a pick six or an interception like right away. So like they had 10 points before Minnesota had a first down again. And then,
we've seen that a lot over the years.
Then blocked punt, now it's 70-0. Yeah, Iowa, the snowball on Minnesota. Minnesota's not as bad as that score indicated today, but Iowa can put it on you. They put it on, on Mark D'Antonio's first good team. Went out there and Iowa put a 37-7 number on him or something like that.
Kirk Cousins had a miserable day after the whole talk. Like I mentioned this on VCast a couple of weeks ago. There was a Ricky Stanzi, who was a quarterback for Iowa, but Kirk Cousins was going back to play against the team that his grandpa played for.
And Iowa,
that was a good Iowa team.
I've not looked at they should have beaten Indiana. And I don't know what's left on their schedule. I'm not saying they're great, but they're going to muddle around and be 10-2, and they're going to be in the playoff,
It's Iowa.
Possibly.
And everyone likes to rip on them, but yeah, they're the only team that's really They're the only team that had a really good chance to beat
They
Indiana.
flipped this much. They kind of have that much.
They're consistent on defense, so I don't care like what people say about their offense. They're consistently really good on defense, and quarterbacks that haven't played Iowa before, they tend to get punished by Iowa. So I don't like. It'll be interesting. I think, Joe Rossi having been at Minnesota, I think that the players on the team will probably play hard for him. I would think so.
The players on the Minnesota team?
Michigan State's team, and. I would assume that they'd rally around their defensive coordinator, but I'd also assume that like a lot of these Minnesota coaches know what Joe Rossi likes to do on defense, and they'll be ready for it too. But it's not going to be easy.
I'll be interested to see what Michigan State has left psychologically, motivationally.
Well, they get a
did you see Hall and Childs today? Understandably, they gave it their all. They lost the rivalry game that they really wanted to have happen. We don't know what Hall's ankle is going to look like. They might have to go with Moa as the guy with the green dot, the middle linebacker next week, and there'll be some, if that's the case. I mean, Hall's still putting weight on it, but what percent is he going to be? He'll attempt to start the game now that I talked myself through it. But
Michigan State's got to run the football.
But what do they have? What are they going to have left coming out of this, effort-wise? This is a grim sport, and everybody's beaten up. But when you fall to 3-5 and you lose this red-letter game, which they were saying amongst themselves, we're going to change this game, this season, the direction of the program, and it could have. Not good enough to get it done, but can you answer the bell
It's
again?
just as demoralizing losing against Minnesota, losing against Iowa like that. I mean, Minnesota's in a better place, probably mental state of mind, being like still having a win.
I'm talking about Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Michigan State will play hard. I just don't know. They'll have to stop the run, man. And I don't know what Minnesota did run wise, and if their running backs are completely healthy, but Michigan State hasn't shown me enough over the course of the season that they can consistently stop their run. They did some good things today against a pretty good running team, but we've seen teams consistently put up 200 yards rushing against Michigan State. That's something that, I'm never going to predict all of a sudden the team's going to fix that just because they say they want to. You give up 200 yards rushing, unless it's like a top 5 rushing offense, like some of those Ohio State teams that have been so dang good that, Baylor or even like USC, they were explosive, so you're going to give up some run stuff, but. There's teams that Michigan State should have stopped on the ground and done a better job stopping than they have. UCLA being one of them.
The UCLA thing I was going to say, this did not look like the UCLA loss. The UCLA loss, you had guys just kind of playing flag football out there. The sideline was bad. Everything was stale. And they looked like a team that was kind of quitting, a team that was laissez-faire. And this did not look like that. We had a long VCast after that game, and it looked like this program couldn't keep going on with this leadership because it was not looking good. I don't get that feel now. I'm sure fans are not happy, 5 straight double-digit losses and all that, but there's more spark these last 2 weeks than there was in the UCLA game, for what it's worth. If the UCLA effort and results had gone like that the rest of the season, they wouldn't have had a chance to come back as coaches I'm talking about. But I think that they showed some fabric today, but people will say, "What are you talking about? You lost 5 straight games, double digits. This isn't the fact. They've got to make changes." And there's a lot of people talking about coaching changes at Michigan State. That could happen. I just don't know if Michigan State is in position to find $40 million laying around, Paul.
Yeah, well, if they lose ugly at Minnesota, there's going to be a lot of people that are upset at the direction of the program, and I'll still go back to what I said. Who is in Jonathan Smith's corner? Who's stepping up and saying, "Hey, I want this guy to be my head coach. We believe in him." There's nobody in that donor group that's stepping forward and saying, "Hey, we want this guy." You don't have anybody vocally saying, "This is my guy. We're gonna ride or die with this guy." I just we'll see what happens. Yeah, they did some good things, but there's also going to be people out there that are saying, "Hey." Just because they played hard against Michigan, that's a reason they should play hard against Michigan.
Yeah.
Just because they played, at Nebraska, you look at that was a winnable game.
Nebraska's who we thought they were, Paul.
Right.
Let them off the hook.
I get it, but these are games you're judged by how you do against your own peer group, and,
yes.
and I understand that. this is only year 2, but they got to be more competitive than this. And this was a game for Michigan.
They can't play like they did against UCLA. In the last 2 games,
this is a game that Michigan State had a chance to win, and
yes, they did.
And they weren't good enough.
Nope.
And I don't know what's going on at the quarterback position, but you can't have really good play one week, really bad play the next week, really good play this week, and then really bad play. It's got to be consistency in performance. Otherwise, you got to make a change, and it's got to. And I'm not saying that Childs is a bad quarterback. He was not good enough tonight, and he's been around long enough where you expect. And he's played in this rivalry. I expected him to be much better than he was tonight, and I expected him to be better than he was tonight without a run game. He was not good tonight, not good enough. Michigan State's run game was better than it was last couple of weeks, yes. And so I don't know what I do like with Aiden Childs. You can't have really bad performance, good performance, really bad performance. It's got to be consistent. This is a second-year starter. It's not a first-year guy. I understand it with Bryce Underwood being a true freshman, not with Aiden Childs being a junior. And that's kind of what I'd say. I don't know if he got too amped up. I don't know what the deal is, but the accuracy issues, that's something like I don't know how you fix that. And I don't know how you can go from being accurate one week to inaccurate the next week.
And him like record-settingly accurate against Indiana in terms of the number of consecutive completions. It was up there in the record books in Big Ten history.
Against a team that's got, good on paper, a better pass rush than Michigan.
Yes, better defense overall than Michigan.
Right, so like it's not that you knew you weren't going to run the football against.
So if you're coaches, what can you rely on? And the question is, Alessio comes in and rallies the team again, and Michigan wasn't trying to let him score. Milivojevic has something to him. Lindgren this week when we talked to him about how Childs did, Lindgren kind of let slip that, we were going to go into the Indiana game and take a look at it and see what happens. And what went unsaid there, if I was listening to it right, was we were prepared to go to Milivojevic in the first half. Well, that's what it sounded like to me at Indiana.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's probably was the case, and that's what I think one of the TV guys said. So obviously it was something that was mentioned in a production meeting or something like you might see Milivojevic. And, and then I think later it was like, no, we planned on having Childs the whole way. But if he had struggled like he did tonight against Indiana, you would have seen Alessio. So the thing is, in my mind, if you're thinking along those lines and your season is in jeopardy and you need someone that can throw the ball accurately, then, maybe you do have to think about making a change.
And how much comes into it when you know your job's on the line, the job security thing? In year 2, I still feel guilty and dirty bringing that up like I did 2 weeks ago after the UCLA game. But the way the crowd reacted to the UCLA game, it was obviously something that's a factor around here, from a market standpoint, politically and everything else. And, taking a look at Jay Batt today after the game and so forth, he's taking these losses hard too. And he's, the last thing he wanted to have to do, because they've got financial problems in the athletic department. With all the money that's coming in from the Big Ten contract and all that, they've got a lot of things going on. I mean, they still need to fill in the football building with things that they didn't fill it in with. They built the structure, but didn't get all the fundraising completed there to give that building everything that it needs and the players deserve and a coach deserves. They're not, you don't know how much you're going to end up having to pay Mel Tucker. No one can find him. So Mel Tucker's trying to sue Michigan State, but people are trying to sue Mel Tucker. They can't find him, and he can't find Michigan. That whole thing. Who knows how long that dog chasing tail is going to take place, so we don't know what the money's going to be there. But there's other financial situations. Everybody knows the red tape Michigan State, the red ink Michigan State's been in the past anyway. And they're going to get more money coming in. That private equity thing with the Big Ten, that's going to happen. That's going to be a windfall. So can you look ahead and say that money's going to be there? It's a financial situation. Fans can say, we need a new coach. That sounds great. Do you have $40 million to just throw out there? It's easy for a fan to say that. When you fire a coach, usually in the NFL, NHL, NBA, you don't have to come up with that kind of money. In this sport, you do. And only in this sport the talk shows dominated nationally about all the coaches that are on the hot seat. Everybody's on the hot seat. Arkansas, maybe that guy keeps his job. Petrino, Florida State, is crumbling there. There's a lot of places that Auburn, that's not looking very good. So there's not enough coaches out there to fill all those vacancies with coaches that those fans are going to be satisfied with. So college football is just an entertaining flavor of crazy, Paul.
The problem is like when you start talking about the coach's buyout, we see this continuously. You talk about it 1 year, and they put it off. Oh, we'll give them one more year, and then it gets kicked down the road. So
Almost
if you're starting to think about it right now and it's out there,
Worked for Virginia this year, though. But go ahead.
yeah, in general, and we've seen that a whole lot over the years. And a lot of times when people say we don't have the money to do it, it ends up getting done at some point. Like
When Harbaugh took his pay cut, after the 2020, and he was on the ropes and all that, they cheated and it worked for them. Is there anything Michigan State can cheat to make it work for them, Paul?
I don't know, but
You recommend any kind of cheating, any kind of cutting the corners?
I always recommend cutting corners and cheating.
Don't play cards with him.
Which is not true, actually.
All right, so a lot of people are wondering about what's the future going to be, what's going to happen, make changes, and in the sporting world, if it's NHL, NBA, Major League, yeah, you just kind of make a change because the locker room, whatever's going. The locker room down here is pretty good, whatever, but making changes in this major sport, and it is a major league sport, is a lot more expensive.
Yeah, but guys are going to leave anyways. That's the thing. Like people.
Those other sports, they're under contract. They're not under contract.
I just feel like too, you don't make a change. There's going to be guys leaving. It's
hard
not,
to recruit, hard to
raise
raise money.
Like you're looking at kicking the can down the road for a couple of years, and so it's either you tear the Band-Aid off. I'm not advocating, but I'm saying I can understand the thought process of I didn't hire the guy if I'm an athletic director, if I'm a president. And football matters. You can't risk Michigan State going into a tailspin like what Wisconsin was in the 80s. Football matters too much at Michigan State. You can't have multiple years like this. And fans are going to get really upset if the performance doesn't get better. I mean, no one's going to be happy with won one more game this year than last year. It's not going to work out.
If they get to that, they'll be happy with that.
Yeah.
Because that will have meant you've beaten Minnesota, Penn State, and Maryland.
Yeah, and Iowa too or not?
No, just need 3 more wins, Paul. 3 is the magic number.
It ain't gonna happen.
Probably not gonna happen.
Just because Penn State's down doesn't mean they're not more talented than Michigan State.
Penn State had the weekend off, and up next they've got Ohio State and Oregon.
Yeah, maybe.
Good luck for Penn State.
I'm sorry, but Michigan State.
If they can stay up and take, like Jonathan Smith said at the beginning of this week, portions of this game, portions of the Indiana game, portions of the Nebraska game, they can win those
games. That's where I call bull crap.
You watch your language, Paul.
I said bull crap.
Your mom might be watching.
Yeah, my mom doesn't care. Well, she does, actually. When she hears my language, she gives me a hard time about that.
She should.
It doesn't matter, man. We've been talking about this. Every single week those guys get up at the press conference and they say, hey, you know what? We had 8 guys on this play. We had 10 guys do it right and one guy do it.
There was less of that today.
Yeah, but it's still happening, and there's still guys
on defense, not as much. They got kind of beat fair and square on defense tonight, Paul. That's progress.
Okay. You give up 300 yards rushing. It's not progress. You find different ways to lose. It's not progress. You don't fair catch a punt.
Ooh, a field a punt.
Yeah, field a punt. I mean, he could have fair caught it, but I mean,
you got to Gary Pettis that.
He
thing.
Wasn't even in the right neighborhood. I mean, I don't know. It was like one of those deals where you lose a fly ball in the sun. I don't know, but those kind of things kill you.
Huge. That was a big pivotal moment. That opened the door, flipped the field. And that was 24/7.
So I don't care if they improved in the. Last week we were talking about, hey, look, the offense did better. Great, they didn't do better this week. They took a step backwards. Last week we were talking about, hey, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago we were talking about at Nebraska. Hey, the defense took a step, and then the week after that they were terrible. So it's going to be a different thing every week. You can't say that they're making progress in these areas unless it's sustained. And there's, so come back to me in 2 weeks and tell me, oh, hey, the defense is playing well, because over the course of time, and we're not seeing that. It's a one game window and then taking a step back isn't progress. That's bad teams find ways to lose, and this is a bad team right now finding ways to lose. And each area of this team aren't holding up their end of the contract, of the bargain in certain different areas. So don't say, hey, this got better when it's going to get bad next week. Unless you see 3 straight games or 2 straight games where there's progress, I'll call that progress. Right now, I'm not seeing progress.
It wasn't 49-0.
This Michigan team isn't capable of putting up that many points.
They are who we thought they were.
It's different. This Michigan team is flawed. So it's apples and oranges. This is like one of those. It's not the same. Those were good teams.
Yes, as Jerry DiNardo used to say, Michigan State's just good enough to lose.
So
just good enough to lose.
But I don't want to
until further notice.
I don't think we want to do a half hour more on this.
So let's do another half hour and talk about. No, I'm joking. Everyone's talking about whether there could be a change or not. We don't know. and really that's a money decision. You know, the people that make decisions are aware of the way the fans are, upset. And if you do stick with them, do you have like a Brian Harsin situation at Auburn or Clay Helton at USC where you're just kicking the can down the road, and next year you're going to end up in the same situation? But and next year it'll still cost a lot? Feel bad for Jay Batt a little bit because he didn't want to come in here and make a decision like this when he's got other things financially that he'd like to be raising money for, and hates to be going around raising money for this because it's going to take a lot of money. You want to fire the coach. Okay, who's going to pay for it? Are there people out there that will pay for it? I've heard a little bit that there are some that do, that are kind of in favor of that, depending on what they hear from others in the athletic department and so forth. But one thing I don't know everything about Michigan State donors, but it seems to me they don't really have a bull in a china shop donors. They've got some that have donated a lot of money, and people are very appreciative for the money that they've donated, but they don't really step forward the money like a T. Boone Pickens and say, okay, now this is how it's going to be. I'm going to give you the money, but I want this guy. The donors right now are not that type. Like Auburn's got like an overbearing donor that'll donate a lot of money, but then he's making calls on things. Michigan State's got some donors that'll provide money, and then they let people make decisions. Now, some of them were bad decisions, like giving Mel Tucker $100 million for 10 years or whatever, and that was donor driven in some respects over what the athletic director at that time wanted to do. But anyway, what I'm saying is there's not some Steinbrenner out there saying, I'm going to change this. Here's $40 million. Get him out of here. There's none of that going on, I don't think, Paul.
Yeah, but I think you got to make a decision one way or the other, and you either got to say, this is my guy and we're going to support him and come out strong and do that, or you need to make a change. You can't have, you can't ride the middle. And I think for a guy like Jay Batt, if you don't want this thing to really, really fall apart, because they're not going to have, they're not going to get money for it. There's not going to be a ton of money. Like, people aren't going to be donating money to, to what they see as a sinking ship. But you can't just sit there and ride the middle and say, hey, we might keep this guy because we don't have the money. You got to come out and support your guy if he's your guy, or not. And that's what I think. Someone's got to take a stand one way or the other. And
the volleyball team's looking pretty good. Can you bring her in here? I think she could probably coach this team.
Well, you know what I'm saying? You can't be lukewarm on this. And you got to be decisive. Give the guy support or get a new guy. That's my opinion.
Do you have $40 million?
I don't. Then go give the guy support. You know what I'm saying? There's either one way to do it, or there's two ways to do it.
And if you support him, then everybody hates you.
Good. That's called leadership.
If it goes to 3-9, the decision will be made for itself, I would imagine, Paul.
Yeah. I would guess so, but I mean, you either do it or you don't.
Basketball season, Paul.
I don't care.
All right. Anything else, Paul?
No. Otherwise, I'm going to say something my mom won't like.
Is she still watching?
No, hell no. Sorry, Mom.
You know who's watching?
Chupin.
As you know, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. Michiganders are squandering $105 million American dollars per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting our environment. So help the environment, help yourself, help your beaches. They're your lakes, your beaches. Take them back. Take them back. Take those bottles and cans back. That's a message from Chupin Recycling, a great company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to your Michigan State Spartans. The Michigan State Spartan fans, as you'd expect, came strong tonight. I mean, there were a lot of Michigan fans in here as well. But the stadium was loud and rocking. The students were here on time. Ironically, this is the only time that Smith and his staff have seen the stadium like this. All last year it never happened, partly because of night games and weather and how the schedule hit. This year, the Boston College game was pretty good in terms of attendance and so forth. Tonight was the first night that they really saw Spartan Stadium. We're going to get that place rocking. Remember when Smith said that? And I appreciate him saying that. It was rocking tonight, and the fans were doing their part, and it was good. But just good enough to lose, but the fans were pretty solid, I thought.
Yeah.
They showed up, and
a lot of people are going to be hungover tomorrow.
And they deserve it. They
when you're 40 years older, no Jello shots.
No, they earned it, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting, and we'll talk about it more, cover it more next week as we get into Michigan State going to Minnesota Halloween weekend. We can see if they go there dressed up as a winning team, Paul. We'll see what happens. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from Spartan Stadium with the Spartans for Spartanmag.com. Hey, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. That's right, $1,500. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. That's O-N and the number 3, ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code ON3 when you sign up. So make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. Go with BetMGM.com. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 and over only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And in the United States, that's 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. In Massachusetts, 1-800-327-5050. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Puerto Rico, 1-800-981-0023. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-GAMBLER. First bet offer for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. And this is in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you've not signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3 and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.